Welcome. I am Margherita Crystal Lotus, and here with us today I have Mark Davenport. He is a teacher, coach, counselor, and he is helping older men in transition. Welcome, Mark.
Oh, thank you, Margherita. Yes, older men in transition. That's almost one word, because it seems to be my experience that getting older is a transition in itself, and there are some special moves that men seem to be going through these days, and they could use some help with that.
Yeah. And today's talk is called What Women Need to Know About Men's Healing. And I am so excited to hear about that, being a woman myself, right? And so what would you say about the topic, first of all? How can you shed some light to us women about what men's healing is?
Men's healing is playing a catch-up game, really, because men my age and even younger grew up in a time when the tables were kind of reversed. It was the old paradigm. It was still, the patriarchy was still in effect, and men were the ones who were out in public making all the decisions, and when they came home, unless there was a really strong personality at home, they were making the decisions and the women were following them, supporting them. And of course, then along came the 1960s, and things started to change. And men were kind of baffled by, what is this women's liberation business? Because it was like watching, for what, from their perspective, the world of Mad Men, that TV series, was sort of the way things ought to be. And things changed before their eyes, and they were confused, perplexed, wondering what the problem was. The old way seemed fine with them. Why weren't women okay with that? They didn't have much idea of the oppression that women had felt under the patriarchy, under the previous generations, many generations. And so it's been a great learning experience for men, and we're really slow learners in many ways. And I sometimes make the comparison. The United States has had a civil war in the 1860s, and slaves in the South were liberated, and after that, white men wondered what was their role. Now they had to compete with black men for jobs and so forth, and it was just a complete, it had led, unfortunately, to a century until the 1960s of oppression of free black people in the United States. No longer slaves, but not yet free. And so we don't want to fall back into old ways of behavior and being just simply reactive and trying to reestablish the old hierarchy of values. But it's so hard to wonder, there's no model for what to do. And men are confused, they're angry, they sometimes are very bitter. I mean, they're no longer necessarily the head of households. The wife may be making more than the man. In the latest breakdown in the economy in 2008, 2009, many more men lost their jobs than women. And it was for a man to lose a job, it's a loss of identity in a way that it historically hasn't been for women. So they're just, what has happened? What is going on? And they do need to be healed from this historical oppressor position that they were in. If they were actually on top throughout history, that didn't mean they were winners. There was a big difference.
Yeah,
And
that's like, this is a huge area. I can see that. And I've really never thought too much about that. It could be difficult for men because as a woman, you have so many things to contend with. So how could you really know? And any change puts us into a sort of an empty space. Is that what you feel too?
well, I have gone through that empty space. Fortunately, notwithstanding that I can be a slow learner, I have learned some things, and I'm now quite okay with the relationship I have with Heidi and with women in general. If anything, I feel more different distance between myself and other men who haven't made the transition. It's difficult to talk to them. They're the ones who need the help, and I'm the one who can bring something to them, some understanding, some therapeutic approach that can be helpful to them.
Yeah. So what is the first thing that you would tell women in general who's struggling with a man who don't really know how to integrate in the new paradigm here when there is sort of supposed to be freedom for everyone? What would you advise them?
Well, that's kind of a well, how should I put this? In some ways, it's more of the same. The men need to learn from you. They need to learn from the example of women. They need to learn about the changes that women have gone through. They need to know how women have adapted to these changes in the past 50 years. And they need to, women need to have some compassion for the position that men are in, rather than fighting with them. There's a way to approach one another with love and with caring and with patience. And not that I say this is fair, but women are better at that by training than men are. So this is a way that women can use their skills to help the man along. And men can learn, but they need to be in a safe place. They need to know that they're not going to be beat up, criticized. They get plenty of that out in man's world, of the competition, of the need to be aggressive, the need to be assertive, the need to ignore feelings, etc. And that doesn't work in intimate relationships, That's nothing that was going to make anything any better for anybody. So if there's any place that women need to start, it would be, I would say, with understanding that the man is really going through a very difficult period. For example, for the first time in history, if the man does not bring home the bacon, so to speak, someone else will. The government will provide funds, will take care of a family. Maybe not in any grand style, but the fact that the economy of the household doesn't have to depend upon the man is like pulling a leg out from a stool under that man.
Yeah, it's like a self-identification that this is how my role is, and now I have no place, or that must feel horrible for men.
It does. It's very, very difficult for many men, especially those who perhaps aren't as well educated or haven't had the opportunities that other men have had. I feel fairly, privileged in my life. I didn't grow up in a wealthy family, but I got a good education. I had some taste of middle-class life and connections with intelligent people, and I could find resources to help me with this. And frankly, the women in my life were not very helpful until quite recently. They just expected me to perform, to man up, do all these things that men have been told to do for so long. You know,
Like a
stiff upper
King
lip.
Kong, you know, like I'm the
Yeah,
man.
come
And
on, get out there. And I love to to work a hammer and nails and pliers and wrenches and get under the hood of the car. Literally, I enjoy doing that. But these are not skills that are going to be very helpful for me today. That's not the kind of thing I need to do. These are the kinds of things that men have done, and that it provided money and income and sustenance for a household.
well, this is very, very important point that you're mentioning because a woman really don't know what's going on in a man's life, and so to understand that they have been ripped off a persona that they have relied on for thousands of years. It's a very difficult situation, and then depending on their education, whatever, uh, the default stage is just to fight. Why are you so mean to me, kind of thing, right? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, why are you doing this to me? My gosh, I'm doing the best I can, for Christ's sake. And I don't want to. I overemphasize, exaggerate a little, only to make the point.
yeah.
Because men, of course, do have to do some difficult work, and they do have to take some real chances. But heck, make it attractive and as easy as possible to take those chances. Make sure they really know how much you care about them.
Yeah.
Make sure that they're not going to be laughed at if they stumble around trying to find a label for some strange feeling. Because for a man, the basic six, mad, sad, glad, afraid, ashamed, hurt, that's about as articulate as we get with feelings. And so I'm sorry.
So what words would you advise a woman to say to her man or to a man that have these, going through this? How could she best help him, and what words can she use?
I'm not sure that the words are so important as the whole attitude. The talking with the body, the talking with the touching, the talking with the comforting. Just like of course, words can be important, but emotionally speaking, you need to somehow think of men as little children, just for a little bit. Honestly,
I'm glad that some man can acknowledge this. This is high five to you, Mark.
I don't mean to be insulting men here at all. It's just that we do have some real growing up to do. So what do you do with a child? You hold them, you comfort them, you say nice things to them. You don't criticize them. You maybe look at behavior that they've exhibited. Maybe suggest some way that they could behave in a different way if they want different results, rather than, just blowing up in public because of some imagined or real insult or slight, that they feel. I recall my my second wife was very fond. I shouldn't say fond, but she did it a lot. She criticized my treatment of the children in front of the children, and it just was terrible. I couldn't figure out how I could respond in any constructive way at that moment with the children right there. Uh, and I would try to talk to her privately afterwards. Please, don't do that. If you have a problem with how I'm reacting with the children, tell me about it privately, and we can work on it. But that when a man is right out there and his dignity and his honor is sort of on the line, and that's the kind of world he grew up in, he's at a loss. If he really cares about the children, he's at a loss about what to do. He doesn't want to make a big scene with the mother, for example. There are ways to do this.
Well, that's a no-no to, in any case, like you're criticizing somebody in front of another person or children or bosses or whatever. It's sort of chastising, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
it's
nobody wants to experience that, but if
no,
the other person is open to it and yeah, and you can have a calm conversation about it, then there may be understanding. I agree fully on that.
yeah. So I don't think there's no special secrets involved in this. It's just to be really sensitive and to expect the man to have some difficulty growing through this adjustment period. And and it's probably going to take a generation before men really catch up. The thing is, this is something that's happening to millions of men. And the men, of course, in their social isolation, think it's happening to them. You know,
Oh, I
it's
see. So the man feel a singularly attacked, like it's I'm the only one, and that he doesn't know
yeah,
that there is a ton of other men too that is feeling the same thing.
that are
And
doing the
it's
same.
not exactly my wife or my girlfriend who is particularly evil or difficult. Am
Yeah,
I
yeah.
right there?
Uh-huh. I remember this is going back a generation or two, but I remember reading stories from 1929 with the Great Wall Street crash, and men were jumping out of skyscrapers because they felt, that the loss of money was their fault, when actually the whole economy was crumbling down. You know. They take it personally. This is how they. It's like losing in battle. It's like being uh, 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 losing face in public. It's like it's something that's virtually unbearable when men have been raised the way they have traditionally been. Yeah.
So losing face is something that I don't know for myself that particularly is important to me. I mean, but for a man, it might be incredibly difficult to lose face in public, in particular, because they're the knights in shining armor who is going to save the whole thing. And if he loses face in public,
Mhm.
what's left of him?
Shame, horrible
Yeah.
feeling. Shame is a horrible feeling. Yes. So. And that is not going to promote any good relationship between the two in the couple. So it does take some. I almost sound like I'm telling women what they must do. And I don't want to really give that impression because there's a lot that men need to do too.
So what
But
does men need to do to communicate with the woman he has or women in his life?
yeah. To communicate with the woman in his life, he really has to feel quite bad about the way things are going, or otherwise he's not going to change. He's just going to try to get better at the way he was doing things. And the way he was doing things is what gets him into the trouble. So he has to, unfortunately, go through some experiences. But we have an old saying from my alcohol counseling days: you don't have to ride the garbage truck all the way to the dump.
Yeah, you can stop on the way and
You can
leave
stop.
the truck, right? And start
But,
over in a different way, right?
it doesn't have to lead to divorce, to family breakup, to aggression, and maybe even uh, wife beating and that sort of thing. And I'm sure that these misunderstandings can lead to all those difficulties. So men, I wish I could tell you, because men don't listen very well in public. They're still feeling like they have to
Oh,
figure
you're
it out.
so right about that.
You know,
You
that
keep telling them, you keep telling them, and they don't hear it. They just think you're difficult or stubborn or something
Mhm.
like that.
Well, you keep telling them, but I try to keep telling them too, and it doesn't work any better. Not until you actually can engage someone person to person and cultivate a relationship where they feel safe enough to really open up.
Well, that's a key point, isn't it?
Oh,
Like
certainly.
that the man in the situation can know that there is help out there, and he has gone this far, and he's on the brink of whatever depression or addiction or whatever, some kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
And we would wish that a
Mhm.
person like that could start to listen a little earlier, but you can't tell them. I've had experiences of this. It's like they don't hear.
I'm sure you know what I mean. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Totally, totally, totally.
it's a syndrome. It comes with being a man and being raised in a certain way. Maybe some of it is actually genetically implanted and inevitable, but the way people have, the way generations of men have been raised has not helped.
So
But
you think it's the raising and the beliefs and the conditioning we have as when we grew up that reflects our behavior now, and when all the other things change in society, where there isn't no one nothing left of that what you were raised for.
Mhm.
This is like an abyss, right?
Oh yes, we're talking about reprogramming. We really are. But the good news is you can reprogram. You don't have to wait for another generation of men to be raised in a different way, or another generation of women to be raised in a different way. This is something we have to do together with each other. We have always been with each other. That's nothing new. But we have, if we look back at deep historical time, we can see that there have been many changes in relationships. It hasn't always been a patriarchy. There's been other forms of relationships. So people can adjust when the conditions outside them push them in certain directions. So, yeah. So I was talking about being compassionate with your man, but you also must be forceful. Just as when you raise a child, there are some things you must insist on. You cannot protect them from reality, you know, and so it's no. You do have to teach them not to run into the street. You do.
So how do you teach a woman to be forceful? Because when I've been forceful sort of in my relationships, I might be wrong or right, uh, that never helped.
Yeah. Well, and that doesn't work very well when it's apparent force. When it's just nagging, when it's just giving orders, or how can you be so stupid, blah, blah, blah. That just, yeah.
That doesn't help, right? When you actually engage in an argument, and you always do this. I know when I said you always do this, that never helped.
It never helps.
But if I stop to engage in the argument
Mhm.
and stop talking and didn't get upset when still the same thing, and I just stayed in the boundaries, that's very difficult because the woman herself have to grow up and not taking it personally, you know?
It's right. This is not a personal business, but yet it is extremely intimate. At the
This
same
is a
very,
very
very
important
intimate.
point, Mark. I like this shifting of generation and the new archetypes or whatever. It's not personal, even though it feels that I'm the only one who suffered with this horrible man who is doing all kinds of things, even abuse,
Mhm.
and that there is help to get. And then the woman, I have experienced this. When I realized that this does not work, I
Mhm.
have choices to make and boundaries to set.
Yeah.
And I could say still I love all the men I've had in my life.
Mhm.
Uh, some a little bit more than others. I mean, I'm not perfect, but close, right?
Yeah, exactly. Me too. I've had some I love more than others too, of course. But I can look back with a good deal of appreciation and compassion at this point, even for the really unfortunate things that happened along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to understand that really it is not personal.
Yeah.
We are pushed
That's a
by
so big point. I'm so celebrating you, Mark. So another question I have for you, how do you forgive your man when he has actually done things that's not that good? How can you help a woman to forgive uh, his man, her man?
I don't think I want to draw those lines for any particular woman. Maybe I would if I really knew the situation intimately and might be able to suggest something helpful. But the woman really does have to decide for herself what her boundaries are, you know? And there are all kinds of, there's help galore for women out there, to help setting boundaries, you know, to getting through these kinds of difficulties. Because women have been talking to each other about these problems for 50 years now. There's a whole literature. There's an industry of people who help women, do just these things. So I wouldn't. I would be presumptuous to try to add to that mix. I think I need to stick with what to do about men. I can tell women what the problems are, but I don't think I can find their solutions for them. No.
That's a good point. We've had a lot of support if we want to, and most ages on the planet, women have always been friends with their neighbor, whereas the man is a little bit isolated on the social component,
Yes. Uh-huh.
perhaps. Like he's the head, and then the intimate relation between men and men. I'm not talking sex, but I'm talking about male friends with each other. Can you
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about the interaction that a man could improve with his buddies so that he can get more support from them?
That's a good question. A difficult question too, because men have been buddies for a long time, but they're buddies in some common enterprise. They're buddies at work, they're buddies in the army, they're buddies in politics. These are relative. I mean, they can be deep relationships too, but they're not about the people, they're about the activity. Because men are oriented towards outward activities. And so it's a treasure to find a man with whom you can really share your insides with, you know. And so I think that's one of the things that I can do with a man, for example. But I've been working at this for a good long time. Men out out there working together, whatever, they're not going to get into any deep relationship. They're not going to worry about the insides of the man. They're going to pat him on the back, and maybe it's not a pat on the back. Maybe it's a whap on the back. Ha ha ha! There's a lot of rather unpleasant touching that goes on between men. Women. Men depend on women for pleasant kinds of touchings. They don't get that from their male world. And that's a whole nother kettle of fish, which is too much for this program.
Yeah.
But uh, it really, it's a difficult thing. Uh, I'm reaching out. I try to find men who are at a point where they can want to listen, want to learn, really, and who might be willing to take the emotional chance. And so my concern is to establish a safe place where someone is listening, who understands what's going on, but also has a perspective that he can, that's me, transmit to the other so that they do not feel so personally at fault about
Yeah, that's important to make sure that they're so triggered already with all the challenges that they're going through, and they don't need somebody to challenge them anymore.
no,
But
that's
before he can listen, he has to sort of realize that, yeah, I really need to sort this out, and it's not my wife's or girlfriend's fault that I'm feeling this way.
yeah.
Is there something like that?
Yes, exactly. You know, and I'm in this situation and I need help, and my resources are not enough, to get me out of it. I need to reach out. I need to be open. I need to accept. Let someone else, give me some input. And someone else who isn't going to beat me up for being a jerk.
Maybe the man is a jerk, but maybe if he would seek an outside source like yourself, for example, Mark,
Yeah.
or somebody that he trusts,
Mm-hmm.
that he can actually sort of vent his stuff with, and not just in the bar or in that situation, but really develop a friendship with somebody where they can talk about these things. That would be really helpful, because then the woman's work at home with him is going to be much easier, and then the woman can actually help him when he actually realizes it's not directed, her criticism maybe is not exactly directed to him personally. It's just some of the behavior he have learned that is not helpful, right?
That's right. And sometimes going to counsel, going to counseling as a couple can be very helpful, at least for starters. Women are often more open to doing that than men, but if they can encourage the man to come with them and to see, to see what counseling might be like, and the man can get some positive feedback, some understanding in that situation, then he might continue on his own, or they may continue together too, which could be helpful. So, and of course, I can do that, and my wife Heidi can do that. We're prepared to do that as well. So whichever would be work better for the individual, we can provide. So I encourage people to listen, and ladies, tell your men about this in a loving way, okay?
Yeah. Well, is it not the thing that a woman who is overwhelmed with the man's behavior, or there is argument or whatever's going on, it's really important to know that the woman is not alone, and that she could seek help and still maybe repair the relationship and make it good, or part as friends if that needs to be.
Well, that, of course, is one thing that can happen. And if they have to part, it's much better to part as friends, especially if there's children involved. Absolutely. Yeah. So
Because,
whichever
I mean, the divorce rates in the world are horrendous. I mean, most people that are getting married, they divorce within a very short time. And I mean, this is an epidemic. It's an epidemic, you could say. Maybe it's a good sign of the new times. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, a good sign, well, somebody I respect a lot has said that evolution may be beautiful, but it's not always pretty. You know, it, things happen that are very difficult, and we each experience them as individuals, and we have to cope with them, you know, in our lives one way or another. So I'm quite sure that in one more generation, the relationships between the sexes are going to be much smoother, with a lot more understanding, a whole increased level of awareness about what's going on with the other person, so that a lot of these difficulties can be avoided. But it is a rough and tumble time now, and so,
Yeah,
gosh,
so we're in a tremendous time of transition. I
that's right.
think that both the man and the woman has to own his or her own responsibility, right, for their own emotions,
Yep.
and then step up to really see, yes, there is a heart beating in the other person, and if I hold back on my immediate emotional reaction and step back a little bit in that and listening to the other person, what exactly is going on here, then the whole situation is going to be much better for both parties.
Yep.
You agree?
Yep. Oh, yes. And repairing the relationship is much more possible from that perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, this has been extremely interesting. So, is there anything else that you would say about this topic, about the men and women and what women need to learn from their men and what they need to know about the healing? Because let's speak a little bit more about the healing for a man.
Yeah.
What's involved, particularly to a man? Is there anything else
Oh,
to say about that?
well, you know what? Something men are not very good at: crying. Really feeling, you know, the loss of an identity, the loss of a whole way of life, a loss of how to relate, both to women and also to other men. You know, an understanding that there's a whole pack of skills that are not helpful anymore. You know, let it go, let it die. Don't forget them, but let them slide to the back. Let new skills, let new perspectives, let new abilities emerge. It's it's a maturing process. Every stage of maturation of a child into an adult has difficulties, misunderstandings, missteps, but we end up not by disowning the child. The 5-year-old in us is alive and well and needs loving, you know? But the 5-year-old cannot be in charge. That's all.
Yeah, that's a point. Like this raving lunatic that some men can look like when they're in action.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a temper tantrum of a 3 or 5-year-old. I totally agree on that. And even women do that sometimes too. So they're not
Oh,
alone.
go on, women don't do these things.
Oh yes, we do. But the man have had a power position, and when he's threatening a woman, it's like if she feels threatened and then it goes to really bad abusive situations, it's really hard for a woman to actually take that power and set boundaries, and it can be horrible situations.
Yes, it can.
So when the man takes command of his inner 5-year-old, hooray for the nation. And then if you're such a man, I'm talking to our audience here, if you're such a man, can you be the way shower for other men and uh, have your 5-year-old inside, and talk to that little kid and say you're okay, you know?
Yeah, we
That would
don't
solve
need.
the whole situation, I would think.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we don't need to criticize a 5-year-old. I mean, he's 5 years old. You know, that's what he's able to do. That's his understanding. You know, and that's just a fact. It's nothing you can't. There's no sense beating that 5-year-old up any further. That already happened to him long ago.
So, for those who maybe not aware of this, what we're talking about with the 5-year-old, can you explain what that means? That there is a 5-year-old inside of me?
Well, sure, and I'd say 5-year-old, but I could say 15-year-old, or I could say 2-year-old. But the principle is the same. A child comes into the world, and it has to be there some way or another. It has to somehow make some sense out of this world, out of this family that he or she is born into. And so from a very early age, they see that something can work and other things don't work. And if my parents are angry and fighting each other all the time, maybe I just have to get in the background and be very small and invisible so that I don't get hit, and it becomes a kind of personality decision that they carry through later on in life, when at some point, if you're going to be adult, it's not appropriate to be so invisible, to be so in the background, to be so passive, And if that continues, of course, terrible things happen inside you with your emotional life, and all kinds of literal physical diseases can erupt from such a situation. And at the very best, you're not going to be able to expand to your full potential in life. You'll be crippled if you continue that 5-year-old perspective. Yeah.
So you mean that as very small children, we adopt a behavior that works with our parents or our guardians, and then we continue that as an adult. And of course, a temper tantrum in a 5-year-old is not really very productive when you're an adult.
Not very productive. No, it's hard to keep a job that way. It's hard to keep a relationship healthy that way. It's certainly no way to relate to your children. Yeah.
So can you talk about a little bit what you would do when you have that situation? You have a man and he gets rages and get very angry, and he's like a 5-year-old. How would you start to counsel that? Now, what do you do with a person like that? What's the first step?
Well, that's kind of an artificial situation, because probably in my presence he's going to be on his best behavior and try to be, yes, yes, and he's probably going to try to continue, in this case, his invisibility, shall we say, just by agreeing and not making any waves and so forth. So if he should, break through and get really angry, and the office can stand the action, I would applaud him at that point. Yay! All right. Now we're getting to who you really, feel like you are inside, who you really identify with. Do
you have a boxing ring there with, a padded room or stuff like that?
We can arrange that. Yes, we can, so to speak. If it's not too rough on the furniture, we can tolerate that. Sure. And I think we have to say, when I was able to get really angry and nothing terrible happened, that's when I no longer had to get angry, because the anger was anticipating the opposition, the resistance, coming back from the world, But when I could be angry and people loved it, it was a safe surroundings,
Oh, so you mean that if somebody can get angry and actually own that feeling inside and being with it without actually having to pound somebody to death, then the person can get over it and own it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You don't have to run away from that anger anymore. You know, the anger is not something to resist, to hold and be rigid and so forth about, but it's something you can accept in yourself as part of you, and go, oh,
I can hardly hear you there.
yeah, oh, that's what it is. Oh my goodness. Well, that's not so scary, you know, because an angry person is a fearful person, you know, and if they can be angry and not experience the fear, if they get right into it and look at it, you know, and there's progress that can be made there, and they can
That's
be
a very good point.
yeah. So they don't have to beat themselves up for being angry or for having other negative feelings, you know, because there's nothing wrong with the feelings. Nothing wrong with the feelings. And there's nothing wrong with the person for having those feelings.
Yeah.
And if he gets to a point where he can actually look at that and accept it, ooh, we're moving. We're moving. Yeah.
And then the person could see that some of their behaviors, maybe it's not very productive. I mean, that's what the woman hopes for, that she's going to change and be nice finally, you know.
Yeah. Well, he does get nicer.
He gets nicer.
I got nicer. Yes, I got nicer. But don't push it.
I can recommend a lot of women to come and see you to guide them, because this has been eye-opening for me.
That is so strange that you say that. It's illuminating in a way, because I want to talk to men, and I end up talking to women about men, just as I am with you, you know. And so I welcome that too, of course. But gosh, there's guys out there. There's all kinds of guys out there who need to hear this. Yeah.
But you know, if you teach somebody like myself, who's a woman who's been married a number of times, if you can only teach somebody who is open to it, right? And mostly women are maybe, I think, more open to healing. And if she can understand that she can help her man in a certain way, then she's going to do it if she's treasuring the relationship, right? And well, if she can have this awareness, this is not singularly to me personally, it's just a thing in society. There is bigger change, and then maybe have more difficult to adapt to the new paradigm that's coming. Then she can feel that she's not alone and it's not her fault. I think that's a starting point, and if you can help women like that, wow.
Well, I think you actually have told me something here that I needed to hear. That working with women might be a special niche for me, where I have some particular ability to help that I hadn't really considered before.
Yeah, because if you work with older men, you can do it through their wives, because the wife is there with them, right? I mean, that's my take on this.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I would only caution it with this sort of condition, that you have to be at a certain level of development before you can look at your own behavior. Before that level, you only are your behavior. You're just doing it without any, not intellectual, but not without any
conscious awareness, maybe?
Yeah, conscious awareness of what's going on. So that of course applies to women as well as men, you know, and so below a certain level, you just have to go through the crap, I'm afraid, and then society has to sweep up the mess afterwards. But when you reach a certain level of development, you've got to be able to think in a rational way, and that takes an adult, and not everybody gets to that level. You can stop at earlier levels. Progress is not mandatory. You still get to vote. and, uh, and so we have a lot of people. I think probably half the population who, I don't want to say write them off, but they're not by themselves going to go anywhere. They're just going to be mixing it up with each other. So we do need to, each of us, grow and develop and expand, in response to our own life conditions, till we get to a point where we can say, oh, it's not me. It feels like me, but it's not me. Yeah. And then we can move onward and take care of that other half of the population afterward.
Yeah, that's a very vital point. I think that, okay, if you're a woman watching this, you really have to take responsibility for your healing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as soon as we blame another person, I think then we don't look at ourselves. It's like you point the finger, and then the other finger is pointing back at you.
Yes.
So women has to wake up too in order for this to heal. I can tell you, as a woman, one is not immediately aware of this, even if we're so perfect as being a woman. We still need to work on our own stuff too, and own what's going on and the emotions that you have. So a good point, Mark.
Yeah, and so we really need to do this as peers for one another. People are ahead or behind the other a little bit, but if they're close, they can grow together, and that's the beautiful thing. And that's what I'm experiencing in my own intimate relationships. The growing together. It is so.
Can't hear you.
It's just, I didn't say anything because I was looking for the word. It is just so, I'd like to say gobsmacking, really good. When this growth together happens, when you can connect and talk to your partner from a point of not blaming, just vulnerable openness, and just speaking your heart as it comes, and not necessarily with any goal in mind, just the sharing itself, which creates that lovely, safe container for both parties. Then the most fantastic things happen. And it's priceless, absolutely priceless. Yeah.
Wow, that's you're painting a very beautiful picture there, Mark, where both people can open up, take responsibility, but then join the energy and experience all those beautiful feelings that can be shared in the relationship.
And you spoke of energy, and it is an energy field at that point, where people are really, really just in a flow with one another. Once you experience that, you don't want to settle for the old crap anymore. You really don't.
I so agree with you. I mean, going back in my life, oh no, I don't want to go back to that older self of me. I'm working through it, like it's hard work, and it can be painful, but oh boy, when you come out on the other side, it's like, wow,
And if I said any more, I'd be getting too personal for public dispersal. So I will not go more deeply into that.
Okay. So, Mark, is there anything you want to say before we close this interview?
Oh, I need to start with a giant thank you, because this is probably the longest that I've said anything like this in such a public kind of way. And it's kind of a therapy for me, the therapist, to be able to do that. I can do this one-on-one with someone, but that's private. This is an entirely different kind of venue, and it's kind of a coming out party for me, if you will. So I really need to thank you, Margherita, for that opportunity. and beyond that, I guess I could only say that if anyone wants to get a hold of me, I would definitely suggest two ways to do that. One is on our website, thepowerofrelationship.com. That's thepowerofrelationship.com. And, of course, there's good old email. Just write to me. M.O., that's my initials, M.O. Davenport, 41, that's when I was born. So I'm an old guy, at gmail.com. That's Mo Davenport 41 at gmail.com. And I would be happy to hear and respond to anybody who would like to contact me. Yeah. So, thank you
Thank you
so much.
so much, Mark. This has been very mind-blowing for me too, and yeah. So I thank you very, very much, and maybe we'll see you another time again. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Namaste.
Okay.
Bye.